call this meeting of the Alexander County Board of Commissioners into session at this time. Larry Yoder, the chairman, will give the invocation, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Ferguson if he'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone please rise, please. Our kind and most gracious Heavenly Father, we appreciate the opportunity we have together in a place of freedom where we're able to have meetings and to do things that we need to do without worrying about our safety. Lord, we'd ask that you look after our military personnel both at home and abroad. Be with our leaders both on the national, local, and state level. Be with them that they would do the things that they need to do in order to make the right decisions. We'd ask that you be with those folks in Virginia, Lord, where the balloon caused fatalities, and be with each and every one. And be with our friend and our fellow worker, Bradley Earp, as he tries to recover from serious illness. We ask all these things in thy name. Amen.
Amen. Flag. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. As this is a work session for the Alexander County Board of Commissioners, at this time I would like to turn the meeting over to County Manager Mr. Rick French, who will go over the county budget at this time. Mr. French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make some general comments and then call on Attorney Bob Jessup to talk about some items related to fund balance. And then once he does that, I have a number of other things that tie into the budget and some of the changes, and then also some comments about where we are financially in the current fiscal year. The current 2013-2014 budget is $35,528,015. The budget that you have in those two sheets that you have, you can find the total for general fund, which is $34 million, and it's on page 67. It's at the bottom of page 67, and sort of on the far where it has recommend, 2015 recommend. It's $34,621,230, which is $906,785 less than the current budget. It's a little over 2.5% less. Did everybody find that? Page 67.
Okay. The white pages. You said
White.
In the white pages.
Yes, sir. Yes.
You said 2.5% reduction.
Yes. Now, a couple things I want to point out is that one, as we talked about earlier when we had a work session, we had $38,389,041 was requested by departments for 2014-2015. That's almost $38,400,000. The key to understand is that county revenue, as it stands right now, is $31,948,720. That's $31,948,720. That's the amount of revenue when you look at all the major items, ad valorem taxes, sales taxes, all the different pots of money that go into the revenue stream. That's what we have currently, and that doesn't change with no tax increase. What we had talked about was leaving the tax rate the same at 60.5 cents. But if you look at the fund balance that we'll have to use just to keep the budget, I will say even, and I'll explain that more when we get back into that. Our fund balance will be dangerously low. In fact, we will definitely have a cash flow problem, which we'll talk more about later. Our budget needs to increase 4 to 5 cents just to go back into fund balance. The fund balance as of 6/30/12 was 29.49%. It was a little over 24% at the end of June 2013. We certainly, the county staff, expect a pretty direct letter from the North Carolina Local Government Commission once they see our 6/30/14, June 30th of this year audit report. which will have a big decrease in the fund balance this year. So at this point, we're doing some general comments. I would like to call on Attorney Bob Jessup, who's an attorney with Sanford Holzhauser. Bob is very familiar with us. He worked with Jennifer and I and the Finance Committee on the financing of the Law Enforcement and Detention Center project, which was, I believe the funding was approved by the board back in December of 2010. So at this time, I'd like to call on Bob Jessup. Bob.
Thanks, Rick. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name's Bob Jessup. I've been fortunate to work as bond counsel for the county for several years now, as Rick said, on the Law Enforcement Center. I guess it was about a year ago I was here to talk about the little refunding for the Bethlehem Water District. And Jennifer and Rick, when I was up here visiting a couple months ago, asked if I'd be willing to come speak to the work session a little bit about fund balance. I said I'd be happy to, and I do want to say that I'm here to give you some perspective on how other places approach fund balance and why other places have a policy of maintaining a much higher level of fund balance, with the understanding that you get to sit in the big chairs because you won the election and you get to make the choices about how to allocate the resources to the needs. So I certainly wouldn't presume to tell you how to, what the most important thing to be done in Alexander County is, but this is to try to give you some ideas about how other folks might look at it. The average North Carolina county carries an unrestricted fund balance, or rather the average unrestricted fund balance for North Carolina counties is just over 20%. And of course, there's a big range in there. The guideline you often hear quoted is that the Local Government Commission requires an 8% fund balance. That's not in the law, that's just their guideline, and they can't do a whole lot if you fall below that 8% other than continue to write very mean letters, but also prevent you from borrowing money. That's ultimately their stick, and they will and have used it. And they will use that to prevent people from borrowing money, even who are over 8%, if they think the trend is in the wrong direction or they don't think that there's a good long-term budget plan. So while the average right now is around 20%, we've seen a trend over the last couple of years that counties that had to spend down their fund balance in the years that ended 2010, 2011, 2012 have started to replenish. So I think that we see in most counties a trend toward being able to add back to that fund balance. Every county is different. So I just want to go over a couple of points about the reasons why folks have tended to have higher fund balances, and a lot of these are things that aren't new, but maybe you haven't thought about them all together.
Bob, may I interrupt just one second?
Of course.
What was the date of the average being 20%?
As of the close of last fiscal year,
Okay,
2013.
okay.
So of course, the most important one, the one that everybody talks about is as a cash flow buffer. 8% would be great. That's essentially 1 month's worth of expenses if your expenses and your revenues came in more or less evenly throughout the year. But as you know, the revenues don't come in evenly through the year. They're concentrated toward the middle of the fiscal year when property taxes get paid, and yet expenses march on relentlessly month after month after month. So if you have any kind of glitch in your revenue stream, then you really do need to tap that unrestricted fund balance just to be able to pay the bills in a timely fashion. And the lower you get, the more you flirt with 8%, the more danger you really run into. And I say danger, I don't mean to make it sound like someone's going to repossess the city, county courthouse, but you run into that nature. And this year, that's going to be even more important because you've got the Bethlehem Ellendale Water Project going on. So that's about a $3.2 million project. And the way that funding mechanism works is you all have to pay your contractors and then get reimbursed from the state agency that's funding that program. But while the people who are responsible for that program are highly experienced and it's their job and their desire to get the money back out quickly, you always have the potential for glitches, either on your end or on their end. And things they don't get checks back by return mail. In fact, I think Jennifer says you've already spent about $75,000 that you'll be getting back eventually. But as you start running into more rapid construction, you get to the height of that construction period, of course, the bills start to come. And in most construction projects, the higher bills come in at the beginning to accommodate your materials and your mobilization costs. So while cash flow protection is the most important reason and the most common reason people talk about it, there is the ability or the need to use fund balance to take advantage of unexpected opportunities or to deal with unexpected costs. One of the big opportunities for using fund balance is when an unexpected opportunity to spend money comes up. Many counties and pretty much every school board has its eye on certain property. And they've probably may even have told the owner that, you know, if you ever get ready to sell this, we'd really be interested in buying it. And it would be a shame for somebody to knock on your door July 2nd, willing to sell that property you always wanted, and you're being hamstrung in your ability to act quickly for that opportunity. The other thing that you're going to be facing is the matching funds for grants. If nothing else, you've got this PARTIF grant that you've got to fund not in the coming fiscal year, but you have a $225,000 match you'd have to fund at least in the 15-16 year. And the more that you don't take that into account in your budgeting, you're moving that stress all to a single fiscal year. Again, these aren't things that you don't know, they're just trying to collect them. Then in terms of unexpected costs, we have, there's nobody, I don't think, in North Carolina more who can say their county is not subject to significant weather events. And a lot of those weather events bring cleanup costs. And even if they're in federal designated disaster areas where you get FEMA reimbursements, those can take a year or 2 years to get processed. In the meanwhile, you're out that money. The last group that I'd bring up to you is the idea of expenses that are insurable but aren't necessarily covered by insurance. For example, if you did have an extreme weather event, you might end up with damages to multiple buildings where you would go past your insurance coverage. Or you might have a litigation type expense that, again, is either not covered by insurance or goes beyond what your coverages are. Now, I'd say that the chance of having a big delay in your tax revenues, a huge hang-up in the payment of the reimbursements on the Bethlehem-Ellendale project, a multiple phase natural disaster, and somebody offering you to sell you a large parcel of property are unlikely to happen all at once. But the risk of these probabilities is additive. It's not exclusive. So if you've got a 5% chance of this and a 5% chance of that, and you keep going a few more 5%, then you're becoming into a higher risk profile. So those are, again, just to conclude that we see a general trend of people adding to fund balance over the last couple of years. I know that anecdotally as well as my limited research in getting ready for this. And there are a whole host of reasons other than just to avoid getting that nasty letter from the LGC. The fund balance serves multiple purposes, and while we often focus on fund balance or on cash flow, there are a variety of other reasons why it's important. I'll be here for the duration. I'll be happy to answer any questions now or later. And I appreciate the opportunity to be invited, and again, I appreciate the chance I've had in the past to work for you all.
May I ask you one question?
Of course, sir.
Cash flow based on the amount of money that is in the fund balance versus the refundable matching grants over the period of time, what effect could that have on county finances?
What effect would it have? Well, the idea would be if you've got a limited amount of, I'll use some lawyer numbers, which just means round numbers that are divisible by 10 and easy to work with. If you have $4 million in your fund balance and your average monthly expenditure is $2 million, and then you've got $1 million waiting for reimbursement out in Raleigh, then the first of the next month, you get another bill from that contractor that you've got under your contract and agreement to pay them. So the idea is that that money is out there, you're waiting for it, but you can't write checks off it because you don't have it back yet. That's the point I was trying to make.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one question. Do you know what the highest fund balance is for a county in North Carolina and what the lowest would be right now?
I don't know if Jennifer has that.
information as of June 2013.
I'm going to write down a number on a piece of paper.
For all counties, the lowest is 6.56%. The highest is 59.7%.
So the lowest in North Carolina, I know the people out there can't hear you, the lowest fund balance in North Carolina for any county right now is 6.56%, and the highest is what?
59.7.
59.7%.
Jennifer, who is that? Who has the lowest?
I have to flip through.
I think if it'll tell you, look, I think it's Scotland.
That's where I was going.
But Scotland also, though, over the next year is going to be,
Actually, no.
okay. Scotland was under 8%, but they doubled theirs in 2 years.
Yeah, they're at 13.
Yeah, they went from 6 to 13 in 1 year.
What did they raise their tax?
I don't know.
Scotland is,
Their tax is over 90 cents.
it's 1.03.
Oh, dollar.
1.0, $1.03.
Well, what is the lowest county?
Yancey County has the lowest. Theirs is 6.56.
Yancey County has the lowest fund balance.
Excuse me, Jennifer, I didn't hear, who was the highest?
I think it's probably a coastal
I think it's
county.
Dare or Brunswick.
That's what I was gonna look for.
Very small
This is
population.
By population, so I have to,
Well, Dare has a fairly good population. Brunswick has got to be a top, almost top 10 county now. But they just have, they're extremely vulnerable to the weather events, so they have to maintain that.
I'd like to ask Mr. French a question real quick. What is our fund balance going to be at the end of next fiscal year?
At the end of next fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that that's,
Well, just in round numbers, what we're looking at is, as we, at the end of this year, $4.5 million, that's not the percentage, but that's the amount. We're in the budget, so far, we've got $2.5 million, so at the end of the budget year, $2 million in round numbers.
okay, in this proposed budget.
In this proposed budget, there's $2.5 million of fund balance.
Okay.
Okay.
Percentage-wise, what does that work out to, Jennifer?
working on that.
Less than 8%.
Wait,
It's about 5.5%.
So it'd be the lowest in North Carolina.
Yep.
Now, tell me, am I correct in this? 12 years ago, under another board, our fund balance was at 2.5%, is that correct?
It's around 2%.
2%. Mhm.
Did we have received one of these LGC letters
Because
See many,
we received many
received
of them,
many?
yes, yes.
recently?
Yeah.
yes.
If I might.
Sure.
You'll receive a letter if your fund balance is substantially below what they consider your peer counties. So they'll look at the counties in your population bracket, which in your case, I think is 25 to 50. And if they have an average, again, just using round numbers, of 25, and yours is at 15, they'll say, hey, you're well below your peer counties, you ought to take a look at this.
What is our average, 24, 25, 26%?
24 is what it was a year ago. I project it'll be about 13% at the end of this June.
No, I'm talking about our average
Oh, for
peer
our group.
counties.
Sorry, I've got that here too.
Counties 25 to 50.
Oh, here
How
it
they
is.
do it, right?
At 2013, the average was 27.71% for our population group.
Average is 27.17% for our population group, okay.
Yes. And at that same time, we were at 24%.
And we were at 24%, and now we're looking at, going to be below 8%, below 6%.
At the end of,
Next year?
At the end of
End of
next
next
year,
year.
yes.
one thing too is, and Bob mentioned the water project, the $3.2 million water project. We also have another project on the horizon. As we recall, we made the announcement at our last meeting that we received the EDA grant, which is $1.5 million. That total project is a little over $2 million. We have $500,000 is our portion of the money. That money has to be spent first, and then all the EDA funds pass through it all works with the county paying the money first and being reimbursed. So you'll have that project going on, which is $2 million, and the water project going on at the same time. And so that's another reason we're concerned about the cash flow that we have. We won't have the cash to, again, like Bob said, we won't have the cash until later in our fiscal year. So we'll have basically over $5 million worth in 2 projects. The plan was to start paying, or start the EDA project, the CVCC project, after the property is paid off, which is October of this year. And so that's when it starts. But we have to spend our money first. But remember, we have to also make the last payment on the property, which is $580,000. So again, that's just another piece of the puzzle we just have to look at.
That money is in this proposed budget, is it
That money,
not?
yes, sir, it is. That's the last payment on the property and pays it off, which is good. But we get right into the grant, which is $500,000 that we'll have to take out of fund balance to make it happen as we start.
When we say property, that's 2 buildings and.
That's all the
land.
property, 20-some acres. It's not just for this, just for CVCC. That's all the property we, decide to purchase.
Rick, let me ask you a question about the CVCC grants and the upfit to the buildings
Okay.
that we would need to do with the EDA grant, the matching funds, and
Right.
the funds that CVCC and other partners are going to kick
Right,
in.
right.
Hypothetical, of course. You get into the project and you realize, God, we're going to need another $300,000 or $400,000 to do what we need to do. What do we do?
Well, the project will be bid. First of all, we'll know what the costs are going to be because the project's got to be bid. So we'll actually do the bidding. Our engineer will do our bidding of the project. So that'll be working with all the partners and trying to make sure all the numbers are, so we'll know then. There won't be a surprise unless we want to add something later. We won't have the ability to add something later because we won't have the funds.
But we don't know what the bids are because we haven't
We
submitted.
don't, you're right. But we'll know the money that we have, and that's the money that we have to spend on this project. That's all the money that we'd have to be available towards it. One of the kickers is that as we know, the Golden Leaf funds that also are a part of this project have to be spent by, I think it's December of next year. And so if basically the project starts in October, that just means that the property's paid off. That doesn't mean the project starts. It'll be first of the year before it starts. There's stuff that's got to be done, preliminary stuff's got to be done, and architects and everything developing the whole project, and then it bid. And so you've got that process. So it'll be a tight window just to make that, if we can in fact do that. We really need to look at our cash flow and have a good handle on our cash flow before we venture that way. I think no matter what, because our concern now is on the water project. Again, we'll have the next payment that we'll have due is about $400,000, and we still don't even have a promissory note on this project yet. And what that means is promissory note enables you to be reimbursed, and the promissory note was approved by the North Carolina Local Government Commission a year ago. It's just taken them, it's been very slow and deliberate. What makes us nervous is that if that's sort of the norm and that's how long it takes for us to be reimbursed, we're going to be in a bad place. It won't take us long to get there.
Well, I
Now-
understand I understand what Mr. Jessup said, how that ties in with what you're saying, because,
You do or don't?
well, I do.
Okay,
I just want to,
okay.
and I understand what you're saying.
Right.
I just want to make sure that I
Right, okay.
follow what both of you are saying, and I think I do. I'm 99% sure I do. But what you're saying in my language is, if the contractor does work, then they're going to submit an invoice to us. The way the cash flow operates in Jennifer's world, if we don't have the funds available, then we can't pay them on time. Is that correct?
That's correct, but once we get the promissory note and whatever's happened, I think that we're getting those issues resolved. Most of that seems to be at the Diener level on the state end. It's still got to go back to LGC and then before it comes back to us, and there's other parts to this thing. But once that's done, we should get reimbursement. It's just the timeliness of those reimbursements for that. It's a no-interest loan, so we should get money, and in time, you ought to get every bit of that money back. So as that process rolls on, up to $3.2 million. Now, not to try to complicate things any, but remember, there's also some other monies that we can receive, which is there's still another 10% zero interest money that we can include in the water project, and in any zero interest money, we want to try to get it so we can do as much water as we can while we're doing water, because once we get on the bad list for LGC, so to speak, we won't be able to they won't let us do anything. I mean, we'll be delayed until we sort of prove ourselves that we're getting in the right direction. But the water project is where we really need to focus now, even though I know folks at CVCC, and we're really excited. It's a great opportunity for a project. We just need to be really cautious how we move forward with that.
Let me interrupt one more time, if
Yes,
I
sir.
may. And Jennifer, this may be a question for you. Let's say hypothetically, the board votes to do a 4-cent tax increase, which would make our tax rate 64.5 cents. What would that bring our fund balance up to at that time? If you can't answer it now,
Well, it'd be $1 million more than
well, I
what
know
we're
it'd be
talking.
$1 million more, so we just had that $1 million for the fund
Yes,
balance.
yes.
Okay.
If you did something like that, our recommendation would be that goes strictly in the fund balance. That's all it does. It goes into that. It doesn't go to fund
Not
anything
gonna
else.
fund anything?
We're not at a point we can do that. And one thing that we've talked about some, I think it's important to talk about tonight, and we've talked about it some as we've gone along, with the Law Enforcement and Detention Center, that project, was, actually, the board approved the funding for that in December 2010, but as we all know, that project was discussed a long time prior to that. There were meetings with, back when Sheriff Bentley was sheriff, there was, before that, there were groups that met and talked about it, but really when it got serious was about around 2007, sometime in that time frame when it got really serious about that. As this thing moved forward, Jennifer and I had to go and talk with the LGC about where we were, because our financial position was improving, and so we were getting in a position where we could move forward with that project. And of course, eventually we did, and you approved it. We got good bids, and the project is built. The building was dedicated in November of 2012. Well, when we did that, one thing we did prior to that was the board had a tax rate increase. 4 cents of that tax increase was dedicated to the debt service, which is $980,000. So 4 cents roughly is around $1 million. So that was dedicated. But we talked about at several times. We talked about we needed to increase taxes more. Not that we wanted to do that, but the Law Enforcement and Detention Center was going to cost another $2.5 million to operate, and we just did not have the funds, either in the growth in our property tax base or in our sales tax base. We knew, what we talk about at our meetings, we look at sales taxes.
Right.
That hasn't changed much at all. It's maybe 1%. There's not much variable in that. Our property taxes have been the same. We're right around 95, 96. It's not much wiggle room. We're sort of, you look at our revenue, it's pretty, we can project where we're going based on the current situation. So when back in 2007, 2008, and as we moved into this, I think the thing that we don't look at as we probably should and appreciate, I know I'm guilty of that some, is that the budget really should be more, because the operation of the Law Enforcement Detention Center costs considerably more, and we didn't do anything to help that cost. Our revenue is at $32 million. Our budget's at around $34.5 to $35 million. And whether we like it or not, that's the decision that was made back in 2007 as we moved forward. In addition to that money, we budget the utilities for the new Law Enforcement and Detention Center, which is about $200,000 a year, and that's budgeted in maintenance. And just as we look forward, the CVCC project will have utilities. That building will be our building just like this is, to maintain and take care of, so there'll be additional costs with it. And so when we had our fund balance up, we moved forward, and as you know, last couple of years, we've used fund balance to sort of plug the hole as we've gone forward. And so we're getting to a point where we aren't going to be able to do that anymore, or at least we'll do it this year and we're going to get ourselves in a bad place. We don't want to get our fund balance below 8%. We really don't want to get it below anywhere close to that. But I don't think we have a lot of choice. As you look at the budget, and we'll talk about that just in just a second. As you look at the budget, though, if you look at your budget, there's almost no capital, there's no personnel, there's no projects. This is, you might think, well, the budget's almost $35 million. What's the deal? I mean, it's, you're talking about, it's because, remember pretty much our base right now is around $32 million. So just to get to 34 million and a half, you have to use fund balance. There's no other funds available. I mean, there's no other funds in our budget. So just want to say that. And also something else to keep in mind, with the purchase of the Taylor Toggs property, we spent $1.8 million. We spent $500,000 a few months ago towards the EDA project, so we've basically committed $2.3 million to this project with all the property in the building over here. So, and we've done that without a tax increase. So we've obligated a lot of money without doing anything on the tax end. So, but the Law Enforcement Detention Center, 10 cents, we don't have I really don't think we have 10 cents worth of wiggle room in our budget. You know how tight it is. So I just want to point those things out. And as I mentioned, there's no projects in the 2015 budget. There's no funds budgeted for county garage, match on departed funds, no funds for evidence storage building for the Sheriff's Department. There's no funds to demolish the Dayton property. The only things that we have in the budget are the water project, which is going right now, which is the Bethlehem Ellendale Water Project, which is $3.2 million, which is a no-interest loan from the state. That's also paid with water revenues. We have the CVCC EDA project, which we just mentioned. That's on the horizon. We also have the courthouse project, and I haven't mentioned that. That's a little different situation. That would be money we would go to the bank and ask to be reimbursed for, but we have a little less than $1.5 million to spend on that project, and that's all that we'd have. So once we get into that, and the county engineer's looking at those plans. But as far as any other projects, we don't have them in the budget. There's no the only new employees that are in the budget, we're recommending starting a 2-person purchasing department, which we can help with control some of our costs, working with supplies and some of the items that a lot of departments are involved in. There's no COLA, there's no funds for employees. We have reduced most of the general travel budgets throughout the budget by 50%. We've adjusted the supplies by up to 50%. Some of that money is going to be in purchasing. Almost all the capital that was requested from departments is not recommended in the budget. The only things that are in the budget are bulletproof vests, which I think the board discussed, which was a little over $20,000. That item's in there. There is a mezzanine barrier that goes in detention, and that's $127,821. That number will end up in the purchasing department. That's something we'll have to take bids on, and we have to be reviewed by the engineer, but that's something will be in there. We have an EMS, we have an ambulance for EMS, and we have, we budgeted $22,500 of $133,000 that was recommended in IT. There's also a capital item in animal services, which is something we're required to do by the state, which is $4,500. But there are no replacement vehicles in the Sheriff's Department budget, in the detention budget, in DSS. There's very few computers. We basically cut all that stuff back. And if you'll look on your white pages, you can go through, and if you look at the bottom of those pages, it shows the capital, and that's all there is what I just told you. That's it. What I'm trying to say is that what you have is pretty much what you have now, minus capital, and the other things we're going to work on would be attrition of positions, looking at positions as they become available and try to deal with them that way. But as far as any other big items, there's not any. There's not any projects. There's not, like the garage isn't in there, so we're not setting it aside or anything. It's just not in there. We're not budgeting it. We don't have the money to do it. So, and just a few other things. There are a couple things that we'll want to talk some more about. We'll have at least We have our public hearing on the 19th, and I'm sure we'll have another work session to talk about lots of details that you have time to review the information. One of the things that we need to talk about is if we're going to look at doing any of the items which we talked about with the COG, which is minimum housing or the overlay districts, we're going to have to budget with the COG. And so that's something that we need to talk about. So that's one item. Another item that we need to discuss later. Let's see.
Can I ask a question without you
Yes, sir.
losing your train of thought?
Yes, sir.
Hypothetically speaking, let's say this board votes for a 4-cent tax increase.
Okay.
And of course, 3 members of the board are not going to be serving after the end of the year. So half of the fiscal year, what controls would be in place to keep the new board from spending? There would be none, would there not?
There would be- you're
It's up to
exactly right.
them to decide how they spend the money, is that
They
correct?
could do a budget amendment just like you could when you took office and do the same thing. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
The thing that it would do, though, Berkey, is that it would it hopefully would generate up to $1 million that would go in our cash flow that would help improve our fund balance. That would put us in a position, we're
At
going to be.
least for 6 months.
Well, at least for 6 months, and we'll be at least be in a position where it'll be a little easier to deal with the water project and the CVCC project. But again, that $1 million, it'd be my recommendation, that money goes in the fund balance. It doesn't go to buy anything capital. We're basically set that money aside, because we have got to. We need to get our fund balance in a better place. And so that's the way I'd say.
After next year, the CVCC property will be paid off and our budget will look better after this upcoming fiscal year. It'll look better.
Not
How are you
necessarily.
you're adding $1 million back to the budget?
You are adding $1 million back to it. If we take over $2 million, $2.5 million fund balance out of it, even though you have that paid for, we've got reval coming, and I'm not trying to be the voice of doom and gloom, but I think that's going to be a negative number. And so if you've got that on the horizon, you've got that to deal with. I think you're in better shape. You don't have that big $580,000. That's good, but we got.
I didn't say it'd be great, I said it'd
Okay,
be better.
okay, it'll be better, okay, it'll be better. Okay. Just a couple things to mention before we go with some of the pages. I want to highlight some other things. One is that CF Hickory have notified us that their a 3.2 water rate increase will be in effect July 1st. There are no increases in the solid waste budget. And our public hearing for this budget would be next Monday, May the 19th at 6 p.m. One thing I would like to, just to illustrate the point that we talked about earlier, is if you look at, what I have in front of me is the statement for the end of March 2014, and looking at the last 3 years. If you look at our revenues for the last 3 years, well, actually, counting this year, say 4 straight years, here's the revenue number through March. $25,342,000, $25,292,000, $25,723,000, $25,851,000. Pretty consistent for 4 years. If you look at the expenses, you can tell where the jail and the law enforcement detention center comes online by the numbers I'm going to read. The prior 3 years ago, $20,139,000, $21,155,000, $23,288,000. So far this year, $23,999,000, almost $24 million. So a little bit more each year. And keep in mind that this is the 14-15 budget will be the first year the detention center is fully, I'll say fully funded. This past year, we staggered some of the employee salaries in. So this year, it'll be budgeted for a full year. So that's, again, those numbers are like that. But when we've talked about sales taxes and our finances, that's been pretty predictable. We've been able to trace that straight across. So mention that. Okay. If everybody will look at these these little sheets, I'm not sure what color you call this,
Salmon.
I think we
Salmon.
agreed on salmon, didn't we?
salmon.
Yeah.
The salmon these are your revenues, and on pages 1 through 75, you have general fund, you have it divided by governing body and all the different general fund. You have all the fire departments, you have solid waste, you have water and all the water funds. You have all those together. The main thing we always talk about pretty much is the general fund, the impacts in the general fund and of our budget and our revenues. So you've got this. So if you want to take this and sort of put this to the side, if you look at the white pages, first department is governing body. And I'm just going to highlight or lowlight some of the pages. If you look at the governing body, it's pretty much the same budget. There's no capital in it. If you go to flip over the next page, it's page 2, it's administration. The budget's less. There's no capital in it. It's pretty much the same things. Every department has salaries and FICA and professional services and different things, but everything, as you'll notice, is pretty much reduced. Page 3 is planning. There's no capital. There was a request for another position, but we took that out. If we add a COG, something with a COG, it'll have to go in that planning budget on page 3. If we do minimum housing or do some kind of code enforcement or something of that matter, on page 4, and again, I'm going through these hurriedly, but there's not really, this is pretty much the same budget as Board of Elections. Same thing with it. It will end up having a capital item, which we'll have to deal with later, which is on equipment, but we'll talk about that more at our next meeting, because there's something we got to set aside in some of our fund balance for. Yes, sir.
I'm going to go rewind the tape just for a minute.
Okay.
You're talking about establishing a purchasing department.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you use these terms, but adding 2 people,
Yes,
would that be adding 2 new positions to the county payroll?
yes.
What is the cost of those 2 new positions?
It's in here, and I'll get to it.
Okay.
I'll show you what it is. So you have Board of Elections. On page 5, you have Finance Department. Everything's the same amount of employees. There's no capital with that. Again, so you can look at that. I want you to go back and take your time, so when we have our public hearing and then we have our next work session, you can ask questions. And you also have a book. I know everybody has that big, thick, wonderful book they like looking at. The next page is page 6. There's purchasing. We have $63,195 budgeted for the salaries. That's with the purchasing department basically being in effect in September. We sort of staggered it so we could start the process for looking, and then starting in September and the rest of that. That really number should go up, because to set up supply items, they ought to come out of other departments and go into this budget, so that they're purchasing them out of this department.
Mr. French, who's currently doing purchasing?
Well, most departments do their own purchasing.
So they could be buying from supplier A, and another
Right.
department can be, supplier B.
Yes.
So there's no buying in bulk.
There's some buying in bulk. We buy paper in bulk. We buy some supplies in bulk, but we're going to put all that together and do that all at one place.
Do you have an estimate of how much savings you can?
No, sir.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is because we're starting small. These 2 people won't be able to do all the county purchasing. It's going to have to start somewhere. So we would do office supplies and smaller items. Right now, in solid waste, there's an employee there that handles like all the telephones and has all the different things and handles all those things together. We're going to incorporate all those things together with it so that we can make sure we're maximizing everything we do. But it'll take time to get it going. So 2 people can't do it all. So there's also contracts that we'll need to look at and some other things. There's other items related to that. So
Well, there was no, on this purchasing, 2013 and 2014, when did this department come into
I'm saying it would take
Send it
effect
up.
in September of this coming fiscal year. This would be new.
something new?
Yes, ma'am.
Rick, not to press you too much on this, because, you know, if you look at the total budget, this is a small amount, but, you know, pennies turn into dollars and so forth.
That's the whole idea, yes, sir.
Okay. One of the things I take from my previous employment, we had to justify positions,
Right.
cost justify. So in your justification for these two new positions, even though Ryan has already asked you the question, how much money we're going to save, do you have any idea, or does Jennifer have any idea? Are we just taking a shot in the dark and hoping we're going to save money by doing this?
No, we don't have a number, and at this point, we'll work on getting a number. We're not taking a shot in the dark, because I can tell you that if we're buying stuff together, we'll save money. We're going to have your support, because in the past, when we've tried to do things like this, it doesn't always work, and we start something and we back away from it, so we'll need your help. Well, I can give you some numbers, but I can't, at this point, I can't give you, it would be a shot in the dark, Berkey, but I know that we would save significant dollars. We're not going to save, $100,000 the first year we do it, because we're just starting in September. We're going to start with 2 people. We've got to get trained. If we do all the office supplies, we got to move office supply money from departments into this. That person would have to, purchase all the office supplies. We're going to have some departments that aren't going to like it, and that's just the way it's going to have to be. We'll get the best price, assign those supplies to them as they request them, and then charge it out, do that type of thing. So at this point, I don't know. I just don't know.
I'm not pressing you on.
No, I know, but
I'm not pressing, I'm just, because people watch this meeting and listen to the meeting, and here we adding positions in a time where we're really tight on budget.
I understand that.
So, when do you think that the return on investment would start? If you're thinking that we're going to save money, do you have any idea how long it's going to take to save money by implementing?
I think we'll save money the first month we start operating this. I don't think there'll be any question about it. I just don't know how much, Berkey. I hadn't had enough time to really dissect it and look at it like I probably should, but.
One more question and I'll move
Yes,
on,
sir.
okay? What I'm specifically asking is to recoup the cost
Right,
of these 2 new employees. That's one question.
right.
And then I heard maybe another question I want an answer to.
Okay.
We're starting small. Are you inferring that we're going to add more? We may possibly add more people to the purchase department later on?
We could in time, but just, again, I think that we want to look at as many things as possible. If we don't need to, we certainly won't. We'd come back to you and talk to you about it. I don't want to sit here and tell you in 2 years it'll pay for itself. I think that'd be easy to do. But again, I don't want to sit here and overpromise something. Think about right now the way the purchasing is being done for the most part. Different departments are buying things. This would unify a lot of those things. You'd be buying from the same vendor. Costs would be controlled. They'd be getting cost information before. We would know what that stuff is. And I don't see how you got to start somewhere. You can't possibly operate a county-wide purchasing department with 2 folks. You can't. Can't.
I'd like to see a list of, per department, not every single item that they'd be purchasing, but kind of the major items. You're not going to save $100,000 in paper.
I know.
Or envelopes or whatever by adding 2 positions for purchasing. So where are these 2 positions going to save the $100,000 plus?
One of the positions is going to review contracts. There's a lot of contracts that are signed by departments that we have no idea that's out there. And we want to get one person looking at those contracts and funnel all those contracts, so not a contract is signed by anybody until it's reviewed.
How are these different departments signing contracts?
They are signing contracts. They don't.
They can't sign contracts?
Yes, they do, all the time. They do all the time. It happens all the time, and we go round and round with departments about it. If it's something that, I'll say this, that we have control over, it's easier for us to deal with it. We don't have control of all the departments.
What departments are signing contracts?
Departments we don't have control over.
Oh, okay, you don't want to say.
Well, you know what those
Right.
are. But,
Mr. French, just to let you off the hook here, is, in your mind, is this ever going to be revenue neutral?
yes, certainly is.
Okay, at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
Rick, and it's really a comment, not a question.
Okay.
But it follows what Commissioner Ferguson's saying. In my experience, again, when Bill South, the department I worked in, went to centralized purchasing, we saved a lot of money, enough to justify the positions that we had. But like you say, and you infer, it takes a while to get the rhythm going because each different sales office was purchasing paper, pencils, staplers, contracts. I'm not talking about signed printed forms and so forth. And so we were able to save the two jobs by the amount of money we saved on supplies by centralized purchasing. So I know the concept is good, and if you don't have the figures, I understand you don't have the figures.
Well, just give you an example. Several years ago, in another place that I worked, we started a purchasing department. We started a 3-person purchasing department. And what we did was, we started buying office supplies, we started buying furniture, and what we did, we got, the folks that we had got good at it. We didn't buy a month's supply at a time. We got so we could buy 6 months at a time. We had a place where we stored things. When the tax office needed legal pads, they sent something to the purchasing, somebody drove them over and delivered them to them. It was done. So we justified the department several times over. But it started somewhere with someone starting the idea and trying to justify the cost. Again, I'm sorry. Andrew.
Well, in your experience, did you have control over all the departments?
We did, yes. And we did, except for 2 departments. We had Registered Deeds and Sheriff's Department. Those 2 departments, we tried to talk with them, and we eventually got through. But we had contracts where we executed the contracts. So they couldn't make a contract with ABC vendor and us not know about it. And it's nothing against them. We just wanted the attorney to look at it and make sure that we're complying with all the laws and that we're getting the best deal possible. And that may always be the case, but it's better to have someone with a legal eye look at a lot of those contracts. Not to sort of throw something out there, but there's hundreds of contracts that are done. There's lots of contracts that are done all the time. And Jennifer and I talk about just the massive amount of them. There's not, usually what they'll do, someone will say, give them to her to look at or send them to me to look at, and we'll look at some of them, but you can't possibly look at all of them. There's some all the time, and it may sound crazy, but in our budget, there's enough where that happens. So we want to do a better job, and one of these positions is going to spend a lot of time looking at contracts. So
You would characterize this position as anti-fraud?
yes, and also controlling the spending. Control, so we can control with the spending. We can get a better handle on the spending. Some departments that have supplies, where they buy office supplies and other kinds of supplies for their departments, they won't be buying them anymore. We'll be buying them. And we'll be getting the best price.
And this would be something like we were talking about before,
Yes.
that county consolidation?
Right. So again, you're only talking, again, I know you got to start somewhere, and you're talking about to save something. It's $100,000, and I'm not saying that like that's not a lot of money, because it is. But you got to start somewhere. So it's going to take us a while to get started with it, but we will, and we'll show you the numbers and but we got to just give us a chance to get started with it. Okay? Next thing that we have is on page 7 is tax office. There's, the only thing that we have in that I'll say that is new deals with the DMV and our charges that we pay at the tag office, associated with the tag office that we have to pay. That's no new employees, there's no capital, nothing in that department. On page 8 is a license plate agency. That's the same amount of employees, there's no capital in that. It's, this is the 3rd year, I think the 3rd year, it'll be 3 years in August, I think is when we started. The next department, there's no capital in that. The next is information technology. As I mentioned earlier, that budget is over $300,000 less. A lot of that is in the capital end. As you see, we've reduced that number to $22,500. And again, I'm just going over these because you haven't had time to do that, and you will in the next week or the next 2 weeks before we have another work session and before we have our public hearing. Register of Deeds is next. It's no new employees, same thing, no capital. In Register of Deeds, we have, like a lot of departments, we've dealt with the general travel budgets, and it's been reduced. Economic Development's the same thing.
Where's the?
No, wait. There's a huge increase in line item 104-8005-54-500 services,
Contingent services.
contingent services, contract,
Contracted services. Hang on a second.
pretty significant increase.
Where's the register of deeds? You
Also-
on register of deeds?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I will point out that the travel budget in there, if you look at that, it was 3,900, has been reduced to 1,950. You got that?
The contracted services, he wants to use some of the special money that's restricted for imaging, document preservation, and it comes in as a monthly charge.
Can you
for
go
the
up?
fees they collect. I'm sorry.
Because you're getting into a long answer and nobody's going to be able to hear it.
The Register of Deeds office, the monthly fees they collect, a portion of that is for document preservation. The state requires us to set that aside and save it in fund balance, and so he can save that until the time when he has a project coming up, and a lot of times they'll wait and have a lot of documents stored or scanned in at one time, and so he's asking for an increase in that contracted services to use some of that special document enhancement and preservation money.
Under page 11 is economic development. It's just sort of the same thing. There's no capital in it. In public buildings, it's less. It's the same amount of employees. We reduced the utilities some, which reduced it to $325,000.
How did you reduce that?
That money, when we budgeted 400,000, it was just over budgeted.
Oh.
Next is the county garage, which is on 13. It's the same. It's a person and a half. Basically, the big auto supply item is for gas, $280,000. Most everything else is departmental supplies or parts and things that he uses to do the service in the county vehicles.
Rick, can I ask you one question
Yes,
about
sir.
the county garage?
Yes, sir.
And I wasn't on the board, obviously. I think probably Larry was, when the garage system, for lack of a better term, was first developed.
Sure.
And I think, as I recall, being in conversation with you and Larry, it was implemented. And it has saved a lot of dollars because we were contracting out or farming out all the mechanical work. Do you recall how much money we saved by doing that?
No, sir, and again, I guess with this, in a similar situation as the purchasing, with this, what we've stopped is all the different people that we were dealing with at that time, back then. We were dealing with all kinds of garages and things. We had it was very little control over it. Now, we're servicing our vehicles on a regular basis. Everything's on a schedule. Those guys work just on all, you can imagine with one, not even two full-time people, they stay really busy. They service everything, and if it's something they can't handle, we will let a garage help us out, but for the most part, they do everything. They do all the ambulances, they do police, sheriff's vehicles, they do, all the other trucks, utility vehicles, and all that stuff. So I think overall, it saved a lot of money for the county. I don't know what that number is. We could come up with something. We also service the town vehicles. And that generates revenue.
Right.
Could you and Jennifer get your heads together and come up with an estimate on revenue generated and cost savings since we implemented this?
Yes, sir. I don't think we do it by next Monday. We can do it by when we have our work session, our next work
That's what
session.
yeah, whenever you can do it.
Okay.
Because I think that'd give us us and the public a good idea on kind of where we're headed with the purchasing department.
Certainly, okay. Page 14, Sheriff's Department. This is no new employees. This budget is pretty much the same as the current budget. And the only capital that's in there are the bulletproof vests, which we had talked about earlier. And again, I'll give you, there's lots of items in there. You can look at that at your convenience.
They requested, how much over last year's budget? Almost $1 million?
They requested $3,158,000. We're recommending $2,351,000.
800,000 over last year's budget?
Yes, sir. Court facility is pretty much the same. Again, there's not capital. That's from the facility fees that we get. That goes back into that. Next is detention, the salary line item, and the other items. It's $2.4 million back in 2010. I don't have my note right in front of me, but I believe we were running our budget with at the old jail was running about a little over $1 million, and $300,000 to $400,000 of that was funds that we were sending to other counties by transferring those folks. So that tells you something about it. But that's in line. They requested $3,113,000 in detention.
What was the request in detention?
Which
I'm saying, what were the big line items there?
they
that-
asked for a vehicle. The one item that's in there right now, we'll take it out, is the mezzanine barrier, which is the sort of the fencing that goes on the upper floor in the jail. That second floor where we have the cells, that's where we had the person jump in January. The rest of it are in salaries, the biggest parts. Most of that, is the services associated with jail, meals, medical, that type stuff. And that's all listed below there.
You're gonna take out the fencing?
Well, we were going to move the fencing into purchasing and let our engineer look at it. It's something that ought to be bid at, so we could do it when we're ready to do it. We just can't pay $127,000. We need to look at that, and it needs to be brought back to the commissioners.
How many
So-
counties do you know of that has fencing?
I don't know that. Well, that's what we'll do, let them look and tell us.
Okay.
So you're not saying we don't do this, you're just saying that's something we need to run through purchasing to get the best price?
That's right.
Okay.
We need to, that's something that definitely needs to be bid,
Oh, yeah.
so.
Rick, I know I missed something here. Are you talking about fencing in the facility, or are you
No, no,
talking
no.
about the netting inside the jail that they need to
I'm
keep
talking
it
about the
from jumping?
upper floor, yes.
Okay, all right, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
It's called
I
a
thought we were talking about
mezzanine
two different
barrier.
things.
It's called a mezzanine barrier.
Mezzanine barrier. I understand what
That's
you're talking about when you say
called. Okay.
that, but when you start saying fencing, I'm
Well,
like,
I'm calling it fencing. It's
thank you.
basically
Okay, I just want to
stops
clarify.
people from,
Yeah. I want
I
people to
know
know I
you can't
was
have,
listening.
I know you
too.
can't have trampolines or anything like that, so they'll bounce back, but I mean, that's
So I
just.
just wanted to make sure I just totally misunderstood.
Sorry.
French, just for
Yes, sir.
clarification,
Sure.
because some people get confused by this. The detention facility is going to have a $2.4 million budget. They generate about $600,000, and that's what the estimate is as far as generating funds, right?
That's correct.
The jail is not, it doesn't make money. It doesn't make profit. It doesn't turn profit.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. The next two programs are, well, several things. The TECS program, the juvenile crime prevention, and pretrial release are all programs for folks that have been, or in and out of jail and been released. Some of their savings to the county, if you can keep people out of jail, you don't spend the money in the jail. Part of this is a statewide program. The juvenile crime prevention are a number of programs that we contract with, and those are all listed, and it's pretty much runs the same. On page 21 is fire emergency services, and again, there's no capital there. It's the same number of employees, and items. There's contracted items there, contracted service items. There's also revenue items that go with those contracted items in fire and emergency services budget. In 911 communications, It's the same employees. There's no capital. There's requests for some radios and some requests for additional personnel. That's not in this budget. It's $592,160, and there were $776,000 requested. Forestry is on the next budget. It's page 23. That's the state. We pay 40%, I believe, of the forestry budget.
Yeah.
Next is human resources, and the different things regarding retiree insurance are all in that. Wellness are in there, and a number of other things. There's no capital in there. Same amount of employees. Next, on page 25.
Can I stop you just 1 second?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
where's the additional money going in this budget? Because it's quite a bit higher.
Well, part of it is the risk management position that we didn't replace immediately when Brad left. Part of it's there. And the other is in the insurance, retiree insurance. Those two items, one of them's $135,000. The other one is $71,000.
So you're saying the insurance that we're paying for the retirees has gone up, and so you've got to allocate
correct.
more resources there?
Rick, in the human resources, does it take into consideration on any line item, and you know where it would be, and you'd have to point out to me the impact of the Affordable Care Act on insurance?
I'll get you that information. There is certainly some impacts. There's some programs that impacts that, some fees that we have to pay, and I'll bring those back to you and break those out so you can see them.
Okay.
The next budget that we have is inspections. We have 2 full-time inspectors. That's the same budget that we have. Revenues have picked up some. I don't have that number in front of me, but revenues have picked up some for inspections. Soil and water gets into the 2-person department. It's pretty much the same budget that we've seen in the past. There's no capital. We've reduced the travel and supplies, some of that budget. Then you get into all the different health budgets, and they're in different environmental health and general health. And the way those budgets are done, the salaries are done, they take part of salaries and put them in each one. And that's in the details that you have in that big, thick book. But for example, the health director's salary is found in almost every one of these budgets, a portion of it, 10%, 5%, it varies. So there's no new employees, there's no capital.
And why is that done that way?
That's just a requirement of the state. They make sure that everything's spread out so that her time is spread out too, so they want to budget that piece. We cannot reduce, was that last year it was set up where we can't reduce the amount of general fund money that we place in the health department budget. It's, in a sense, it's sort of like the way that the libraries are done. There's a certain amount of money you can't, called maintenance of effort, thank you. So you can't set it below that amount of money.
Rick, I just want to go back to inspections just for a second.
Okay.
And this is anecdotal information
Okay.
that I have picked up in talking to those folks down there, just ad hoc conversations, if you will. In the last couple of months, they said the number of new permits for housing has picked up significantly, which I think is a good, I hope it speaks to a good trend in the county economy.
Certainly.
They said it's really a lot more than last year and the year before that, so maybe that's going to be helpful for a revenue perspective as far as property tax revenue.
I hope so. I was trying to flip through here and find I'm sorry, I can't put my hands on it, but,
Looking for the revenue,
pardon me?
expected revenues?
Yes, I was trying to
It's,
sort of flip through that.
145,000.
Yeah, 145,000 revenue, so it's picked up, it is picking up, so,
That's expected.
yes.
Okay.
But it's, because like you're saying, Berkey, it is improving.
That's a good trend.
Yeah, it
Yes.
is a good trend.
Yes.
Again, all the different health department, dental health, family planning, health promotions, there's just, that goes on for pages and pages. If you go to page sorry. Page 41 is EMS, emergency medical services. Remember, we looked at that. The amount requested was $3,375,000. We're recommending $2,437,000. We are replacing the ambulance, one of the ambulances. What was requested was another crew, and remember, we talked about that. We had the information from COG and talked about that, so that's where we are with that. Animal services is next. That budget has increased a little bit. We're right at being full. At various times, we've been at 4 positions, and that's where that's the direction that we're headed, is going back to that. Has to be somebody in the shelter. We have to have somebody clean the shelter every day. That's a process. We use inmates. We do a lot of different things there. If you've noticed, our numbers are improving greatly. Our rescue numbers and our adoption numbers have improved significantly. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'll bring them to the next.
Well, no, what I was going to ask was, it's gone up about $10,000, the recommended budget over last year, but it's still, that number is a lot less than 2013. Why is that?
We had, at that point in time, had more part-time people. That now we've gone to 4. We've gone to 4 full-time and a part-time person. We had more part-time people. That's why.
So actually, the full-time people are actually saving some money.
Yes.
Well, I know one thing you mentioned, Rick, and I want to make sure that everybody, I know, I've seen the reports as far as how many animals we adopt out now, as opposed to what we used to do. And if the people, of course, they haven't seen the reports that we've seen, but it is a great thing that we're doing in the animal shelter, the number of animals that we are finding adoption places for, a significant amount of the animals.
You can go on their webpage, and there's something we've been keeping the data since January. So every month there's a month-by-month breakdown, and it's very impressive, like you're saying.
So if I'm somebody listening out there or watching out there, they would go to the county homepage and
Yes.
click on the animal shelter, and they can see those
Go
figures.
to animal services, and you'll see it'll say numbers by the numbers or something like that, and you just click to that. It'll show you month by month
Okay.
what those numbers are.
Mr. French, you said that you use inmate labor.
Yes, sir.
That's state inmate,
Yes, we do.
not county.
Not county, yes, sir, that's correct.
Can you use county inmate labor?
Can now.
Yeah, we can now.
If the sheriff approves it. Just can't force him.
Next, we have medical examiner, and then we have cooperative extension, and that's, before you ask, the contract service item is the salaries. We basically, they'll be at fully funded here soon, and that gets them back to where they were to be fully funded. That's why their budget's a little bit more. We have reduced their travel. And there's no capital. On page 45 is veteran service, and
Rick, just back to
Okay.
cooperative. Some of the things that have been coming down from the wire from cooperative extension is they're looking at themselves as some consolidation.
they are.
Have we got any more out of the state from that, as far as shifting offices, consolidating territory, or anything?
That is just something they're continually looking at. What they would like to do is share with other counties at a county share position, and they do a little bit of that, but they're going to do a lot more of that in time.
Okay.
Veteran service is on page 45, and we have a lot of good county employees, but Ginger does a fantastic job. In that budget, it runs about the same, as you can see, every year. We have reduced the amount of money that we've had approved in the past, $1,000 through the Veterans Committee, but we reduced that to $500, and we have reduced some travel. But she does a fantastic job.
Rick, if I can add a footnote to her doing a fantastic job, I think a comment that I'd heard from her, maybe you've heard the same thing, there's 2,800 veterans in the county,
A little bit more, I think, yeah.
somewhere around that. Yeah, and so with this amount of money, she's doing a fantastic job
Unbelievable.
servicing 2,800
Right.
veterans.
She does a great job. The next few pages that you have are the social services budget, and those are go from 46 all the way through page 56, different budgets. There's no capital outlay in it. It's pretty much like we're operating right now. It still increased some, but that's some built-in stuff costs that we have. But
It's what cost? I'm sorry.
there's no capital cost in it. It's the same number of employees as they've had in the past. Cindy utilizes part-time people in different ways to help with the different programs that they have dealing with. So that's why you have the numbers that you have.
It looks like there's a cost in group insurance and retirement.
There's some of that, yes. That's about the same, because we have full years on some, and we didn't have fully staffed and others run, so it's not anybody new, it's nothing new.
Okay.
And so when you get time, look at those, and also you can look at the book. Cindy did a good job of organizing all the different information for you. If you go to page 57, it's recreation budget, and it's a little less. There's no capital there. Same folks, there's 3 full-time employees and a whole bunch of part-time people.
I see recreation has a nearly $300,000 expense, and we bring in less than $65,000, so,
That's actually increased.
really.
Yes, sir. The last couple of years, it was running in the 20s at one time. It's increased.
Okay, so it's $230,000 loss.
That's,
Yeah, but the way county recreation set up here, it'll never be revenue neutral.
Right.
Never happen.
Well, the
Well,
next one,
also, just
the next one's even worse.
a comment. Having a recreation department is a great thing.
it is.
Getting kids out of the house, participating in sports. So it'd be great if it could be revenue neutral, but the amount of expense and the benefit from that, I mean, just, if you just want to take one example, the young ladies softball team from the high school that's won, 8 state championships? That's a derivative of the recreation program, because these kids are playing softball from the time they can, the time they're in school until they get old enough to participate in the high school program.
Oh, I agree, and I agree. I've had people say, well, we pay all this money in, in these fees to play T-ball or whatever, but it doesn't even remotely cover the cost of recreation.
It may not. The only thing I'll tell you this is that my son's little boy is playing T-ball in Forsyth County. Cost him $165 for the season for him to play T-ball.
Wow.
Case closed.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
exactly.
But they pay it all down there. In other words,
I don't
we
know what he
have-
pays. I just know that I about passed out when he told me it cost $165 for a kid to walk on the field
I've
to
heard
play
that.
T-ball.
We've made, over
It's
the
just a
years,
comparison of counties and the revenue and how much it cost them versus what it cost us here.
over the years, I think we've made big improvements in recreation. We've got
Tremendous.
to a situation where we have good facilities. We've had good facilities in the past, but now we have more facilities. There's a lot of kids participating in the sport. All the umpires or referees are screened. We have a process where we go through and make sure that our kids are safe. There's a lot of review on that and from a number of aspects. So, and just think there's 3 full-time people and there's all those kids. There's a number of part-time people that are used here. But
Well,
they do
Rick, is it not true that recreation is not revenue neutral, but how many other departments do we have?
There's
Like
lots of departments.
The licensing place, it's always in the red, right?
That's correct.
We've never made money on it.
That's correct.
We never will make money on it.
And it's not saying you don't do this with the idea that you're going to make money on it, or you're going to break even with it.
The
Well, that's
fact
what
that-
I'm saying.
Right.
The fact it's making any money.
But some of them do,
Right,
as
they
in
make some revenue.
inspections, building inspections.
Right.
Our EMS, for instance,
It
we're
does.
always in the red on it.
We are.
You can't, I mean, it's,
We can-
Alexander County is not in the business for making money.
We
They're in making-
try, Judy, we try to look at every one of those, and we talk to departments. If we see where they fall behind, recreation actually generates more money than they did.
Yes.
And if we see there's problems, we talk to the departments, try to work, make sure things are identified early on so we can generate as much revenue as we can. And so I think that's a plus. And just one of the things that we do too that is in recreation, we put it in there, you see it's called race expense, and that's something that we do with the races that we do in the county, and I'll say road races in the county. We provide finish line services, and they, in response to that, those services, they pay us for our supplies that we use. And we do, for a small county, we do a lot of races. There's actually 10 races that go on in the county. And so I think that's quite a lot to offer of different distances and things that we do. We're getting ready to do a 10K and a 5K run in association with Rocky Fest. So there's a lot that goes into that. It won't make money, but it'll generate some money. So I think, again, it's a small thing that goes a long ways.
But look at the people that recreation serves.
Oh, yeah.
In comparison to, say, EMS. I mean, we may not be revenue neutral in it, but it's serving a lot of people.
In Alexander County, look at it, for a county our size, and again, I'm going to go to something that I know a little bit about, is the race expense item. There's probably over $50,000 generated that goes back into organizations in the county that help other organizations, church-wide organizations, things like Robin's Run and Carrying Hearts and things like that. And in return, there's probably over 2,500 people in the county running every year participating. That's unheard of, and that's excellent. We want to keep working on making that number go up. So it's a good thing. So anyway.
Recreation's a good thing. I want to make that point
Yeah,
clear. I'm not
exactly.
trying to throw a shot at recreation. The only complaint that I have with county recreation is we don't have an aquatic center.
Right, I know.
And if we ever get the aquatic center, I'll be sitting there saying, yay, yay, because our seniors need an aquatic center.
Right.
And that needs to happen at some time. That's the only complaint that I have with recreation.
On page 58 is Rocky Face Park. And again, we're sort of in our second year. We're continually working on getting our expenses down some, and we've done that again. We started out at $168,000. Now the budget's $124,000. We'll keep working on that. It doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but it sure is
Generates no
used a lot.
revenue.
Sir?
It generates no revenue.
Well, there's actually a little bit. There's a little bit of money that's generated. It's just not shown. We get a little bit of money, a few $100s on it. We don't get much
What, from donations or what?
from donations. We're also going to pick up some monies from some of the climbing stuff that goes on. We're working on that, so we'll get some money out of that.
How many visitors have we had? Do you have an estimate?
We had 25,000 our first year, but I'm sure we'll exceed that our second year. Next item is library, and you have the library and the Bethlehem Library, and those budgets are basically the same. There's no capital, same number of employees. The Bethlehem Library is on the next page, page 60. Likewise, the senior center is pretty much the same budget, the same amount of full-time people. There's no capital in it. Everything is pretty much in line as it is now. It's a little under, not by much. CVCC, Board of Education, and the rest of the items that you have in your budget, I'll give you time to look at those things. We have our debt service on page 64. Debt service on all the, I have that with me, is $2.6 million. Maybe I didn't bring it with me. I was going to show you the debt service, where the breakdown is on debt service in our county. Of course, the big item is the detention center, as we know. But then you have interfund transfers, which are landfill closure, things that we budget every year. You can see that. There's no money set up for anything except those items listed. We have special appropriations, which are, we set aside money for our parade, for the Hid Night Center, for the Visitor Center, for COG dues, for a multitude of things, Smoky Mountain Mental Health, YMCA for the wellness program, Red Cross. The biggest item on there is economic development. That's basically the incentive policy, and David comes to every year, we go through that process, and that's $150,000. And the second thing is the rescue squad, and they utilize us and help us, so they work hand in hand with EMS. And then the last page you have is contingency. And again, that we've done this really fast, but again, I want to give you time to look at it, look at your book, ask questions. We'll have a public hearing next Monday night at 6. The general fund budget is $34,621,230 is what's proposed. There's still a couple things in there I want to look at some more, but that's where we are right now. Let's see. There's something else I wanted to mention to you. Look at my notes. Does anybody have any questions?
So basically, Mr. Prince, what you're recommending is a 4-cent tax increase?
Well, I think we could use 4 to 5 cents to
4 to 5
to all
cents,
go in
4
fund balance. 4 to probably the bare minimum, as we talked about earlier, we need that cash flow. I will mention that something we haven't talked much about are some maintenance issues that we have on some of the facilities that we have. We have a number of buildings that are starting to show their age, and we normally do some minor maintenance, but we have some things that we'll have to work through. We have a concession building at Dusty Ridge Park. The old Wittenberg Fire Department is a building that we purchased and we store emergency equipment in. It needs some work done to it. The gym at Old Wittenberg needs some work to it. And if you've been in the bathrooms or in the showers are not in very good shape. And so that's just some items I'll mention there. And I mentioned earlier about the COG if they're doing anything, either it's minimum housing or enforcing zoning or doing overlay districts, they've got contracts for every one of those parts. So we'll have to look at that as we go forward because we don't have any of that budgeted. So again, we haven't touched much on solid waste or water and sewer, but there's solid waste, there are no fee increases or anything in solid waste. And the employee number is the same. Water, I mentioned earlier, Steve Hickory's going to increase our rate by 3.2%. So
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
3.2, Hickory's going to charge us 3.2% more for water next year, starting in July. So are there any questions?
Nice.
There's a whole lot more stuff I could have said tonight, we could go over, but again, I'm just trying to do an overview, and I wanted Mr. Jessup to make a few comments about the fund balance, because I know we're all concerned about it. But again, we're starting from a $32 million budget in revenue, not a 35. I wish we were, but we're not.
Mr. French, would you characterize this budget as a budget crisis?
Yes, sir, I would.
If whatever resolution we decide to do, whichever one, the proposals that have been kind of bandied about, what's going to happen next year? Are we going to be having the same conversation next year?
Yes, sir.
And so at what point do we cease having this crisis conversation? Because it sounds like this is kind of a classic kicking the can down the road. Well, we'll come to a dead end, so.
I think until we develop a plan, I think we'll keep on kicking the can down the road. I think we need a budget plan. We need a
Long-term.
capital outlay plan. We need a 5-year and a 10-year plan.
We don't have one.
No, we don't. We've talked about it, but honestly, things happened like a few years ago. We talked about it, and then the Medicaid reform and all that stuff happened, and when that changed, when sales tax changed, it just really, it impacted us. It's what Larry
It did,
talks about.
And then the other thing people also need to remember, we built the jail, and, when we were building the jail, we were discussing. I mean, I got the letter at that time. I received the letter from the Superior Court judge telling us how the county commissioners were either going to have to do something or we'd be held accountable. I never did find out what that being held accountable was because I didn't want to.
Right.
But, so we built a county jail, and at that time, we made sure that we had the money there to do the debt service. And we had talked in those times, whenever all this stuff was in discussion stages, that it would probably be a 2 or 3 cent operational cost of the facility.
Right.
Knowing that it was not going to be a facility that was going to bring revenue in the county, but at the same time, if we have federal or state inmates, we'd have some revenue set off from that.
Right.
And that was discussed in 2000, I don't remember how long ago it was, 7 or 8, whenever it was.
Right.
And that was discussed. Now, there was a lot of people involved in that.
Right.
It wasn't just county commissioners. There was, it was a nonpartisan group of people that, from each party, and some not even from a party, that were there discussing this thing in the meetings, and this is the way all this came about. The one thing that we had tried to do also is we had tried to buy each year, we had tried to do 3 county cars for the sheriff's department. We had tried to do that each year. We had to stop doing that because revenue had failed down. And at no time did we raise the taxes to pay for the operational cost of the jail. We didn't do that, which should have happened.
Right.
We voted, this board voted last year for $3.2 million to come out of the fund balance. We have not offset that in any way. There's no revenue or nothing that we can use at this time that I'm aware of, because we don't have user taxes in this county. We don't do those. The only, yes, going to the landfill and going to convenience site, that's a tax any way you look at it, and you have to pay. But if you bring your recyclables, it's a way to get people to do recycling. So, we've done those things. We wanted to tear down the Dayton building. We wanted to do Rocky Face, which I think has turned out to be a real good thing, and do some other things here in the county that probably should have been done. But at the same time, I don't think that we can sit here and actually point a finger at one thing or the other thing that caused us to be where we're at now. We did the jail. We agreed and we voted to spend $500,000 on CVCC, which is 2 cents on our tax base, because it takes $250,000 per penny for our taxes. We don't have that much coming in. We agreed to pay $15,000 for the sewer line down 16 South that we thought and we pray that will continuously to improve the economic development situation of the county. Now, in doing those things, we also did some things. There was pay raises given to certain groups, and that was also in there. And there was no revenue offset for those increases that I'm aware of, that we increased taxes to take care of that, and not all county personnel at that time received the tax increase. And personally, I think from the conversation you and I've had and conversation I've had with other people, that either we do it this year or we do it next year, but it's going to end up and it's going to cost this county a 10-cent tax increase. Whether you do it this year or whether you do it next year, it's going to happen. And next year with reval coming in, if revenues remain flat, then you're going to have to see, or if they go down as far as the reval goes, if that goes down, then you're going to have to see another tax increase to offset the cost, because you're going to have to flatten it out and to make it so that it pays for the expenses. So we either bite the bullet this year, bite the bullet next year, but whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, or whether you're independent, whoever sits in these chairs, you're going to do one of 2 things. You're going to totally cut services to the citizens of this county. You're going to cut employees.
Not totally, but.
Well, I'm saying you're going to cut services. You're going to cut services, you're going to cut employees, or you're going to raise the taxes. Because we do not have the revenue coming into this county from other sources of our sales tax to make this happen. We've done some real good things, some outstanding things in this county in the last 4 or 5 years to make it better. And, I personally think that, a 10-cent tax increase is what's going to take to make this thing happen, to get our fund balance back to where it needs to be. I've sat through 3 years of a 2% fund balance, and I got the letters. They came to the chairman at that time, and I'm going to tell you, we couldn't do anything. It took us 4 years to get that revenue back up to where we were able to do things, including building the county jail. That's why we had to wait so long. Do I agree with property taxes? I want everybody to know absolutely not. I don't think property taxes are the answer to everything. But we're in a situation in Alexander County when you have 2 taxes. You have sales tax and you have property taxes. Our owners in this county that own land, they suffer the consequences of being able to provide the services for the people in this county. Do I like it? No. But somewhere, somehow, some way, we're going to end up biting a bullet for the things that's going on. I saw an editorial in the Total Times, and it said we did too much, too fast, too quick. Well, maybe we did, but those things had to be done in order for us to be where we're now. And that's my opinion, and that's the way I feel about it. And this board or any other board, they're going to have to sit down, they're going to have to look at it, and there will be a tax increase, whether this board does it or any other board does it. So that's where I say I don't see where we can cut any more services. We can't cut the senior center. I don't see how we can cut our health department or our social services. So many things from social services are mandated by the state, I mean, it's just like our probation and parole. Maybe some of you don't realize it. We pay for the rental for probation and parole. We do not get one penny from the state of North Carolina to provide them housing for their offices.
Get $1.
Well, $1, woo-hoo. But I'm saying, we don't get that money back.
That's right.
We don't get it back. And we pay for their rental. And, you know, the state should be paying for that. You know, we don't, you know, but that's where I feel like we're at. That's my opinion. That's the way I feel about it. Will it be popular? Absolutely not. If I stood here right now and made a motion to raise taxes 10 cents, would I be the most popular person in this county? Absolutely not. I think I might live through tonight, but somebody somewhere would say something to me tomorrow. But we're going to have to do something, and we're going to have to take the bull by the horns and do whatever it needs to be done, because we had not made the plans to be able to take care of the revenue. I think it gets us back to where we should be with a 10-cent tax increase.
One of the things that we need to continually to work on, which I think is extremely important to our county, is our utilities. We've done a lot of water work in the last 13, 14, 15 years, but we got a whole lot more we need to do, and grants ain't what they used to be. There's no more zero interest loans. It's going to be a low interest loan. That's why we want to do as much as we can, and we never want to get in a situation where we can't do more water. We just still got lots of areas in the county that need water, and water will help us. Water will help us grow. It'll provide orderly growth. You know, it would be great to have some more county sewer. That's a lot more expensive, and it's harder to get funds for sewer. But water, you know, we seems like every couple of years we do some pretty good sized projects. But there's just, you know, the thing that I keep reminding myself, there's a lot of people in this county that don't have water, don't have that county water line by their home, and we need to work all we can to keep doing that. And that's just so vitally important. It's also important, I think, to economic development. It helps our county grow, and it'll help any business that comes in. The counties around us have countywide water. They have countywide sewer. You know, it's a tough battle for us when you go against a Catawba County or an Iredell County. So it's just something that part of what we have to work on and keep working on. But we need a plan. We sort of get something and we get going on it, and we'll find something, somebody will contact us, and we'll start working on it, and it works out, but it's not according to more of a plan. And a lot of that has to do with every time we sort of get dependent on something changes on a state basis. Again, go back to the Medicaid reform. That killed us. But, you know, we have to deal with what we have. Our sales taxes are not what they used to be, and we all know that. Thank goodness for the article that we did, that quarter cent that we've got that helps us a lot more. It's $350,000 a year. So that's a big help. So,
Well, let me just interject. You mentioned sales tax. The way the allocation of sales tax changed, so everybody's heard it before, but I want to say it again.
okay.
From a per capita distribution to a point of sale distribution,
Kills us.
the figures I looked at, Alexander County lost almost $3 million in sales tax revenue.
Now, we lost the cost of Medicaid, and what we've heard from the association is that there's some discussion of some folks that they'd like for us to get that cost back. We've also heard some discussion that they'd also like to keep the sales tax like it is. So we have to keep our eye on what's going on in Raleigh all the time.
And there's also discussion about counties maintaining secondary roads.
That's still a process.
still
Chairman
right.
Yoder and I spoke with Commissioner Ronnie Beal, who's going to be the next president of the Association of County Commissioners, and he told us we really got to keep an eye on that, because he thinks they'll try to address that in stages. You'll get a piece of it, and then you'll get another piece of it, and then 3 or 4 years, we'll be in the road business.
Because you got to watch the attachment to the bills.
Yeah.
Got to really watch those
Like the
attachments.
one I think I sent to you guys, there's
About
actually
tax
Energy
increases.
Commission in legislation that's being discussed as an attachment to that bill has a provision in there where counties cannot raise their property tax more than 8%
Right.
in a fiscal year.
And that was in an Energy Commission
Right.
attachment, correct?
You know, for us, that would be, what, 5 cents? 5 cents.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the
but
same as
they
in
have no
Burke.
business getting into that part of what I
Yeah.
consider your
But that's
authority.
not, but they want to get their nose in there. The other things, now, I don't want us to get to the point where they were in Burke County, they used their fund balance and they did everything they could do, and they kept trying to hold costs down. Next thing you know, it was what, 22 cents, I believe it was? I mean, I think it's 22 cents.
They raised
Caldwell
taxes.
County did the same thing.
And Caldwell had to do the same thing, so,
What year did we lose the sales tax, point of
5 years,
sale?
5, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
0809 when it
In other
started.
words, it's been, we knew full well last year and the year before
We
that
did.
we wasn't
We-
gonna get that
We
money.
did, yeah, we did.
We still continue to do what we did, knowing we were
What-
not
What
gonna
they
get
did,
any
Judy, they took
revenue.
away our Medicaid expense.
What year they did that?
In exchange for that, they took some of our
Some of our
sales
sales
taxes
tax.
and changed statewide the way the way sales tax was distributed, which was, at that time, some of the sales tax was distributed on a per capita basis, which means what's generated in all the counties gets distributed not just one
I
sale.
understand all that, and I know it. I'm just trying to make the point that we knew full well before we spent all this money, that we wasn't getting this money.
Sure we
that had
did.
been-
Sure we did.
in
We've done
other
the last
words-
couple of years. We know our sales tax.
In other words, we knew we weren't gonna have this revenue.
Right.
And we did it anyway.
Right,
Or it was done anyway, not we.
right.
But anyway, there always is a reckoning day, and if you dance, you gotta pay the fiddler.
Right.
That's true.
If you buy stuff, you gotta pay for it.
I got a question. The jail, the operational cost of the jail, when it was up here at the old courthouse, or the courthouse, what's the increase in the operational cost since since they've moved to the new jail?
2010, 2011, it was $1.1 million. This year in the budget, we're proposing right at $2.4 million. That does not include the utilities,
How much are utilities?
200,000 plus.
How much?
200,000 plus.
So 1/5 of the education budget.
That's correct. And of that 1.1 million that's in the jail, 300 to 400 of that was in what we sent to other counties for our inmates.
Can I put you on the hook for a second?
Sure. Yes, sir.
You did a good job taking this budget down 2.5% less than last year.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. Taking it down an additional 2.5%, another 2.5% revision would yield about $860,000. Is it possible to reduce this budget another 2.5%?
I don't think.
It could be a rhetorical, and you don't have
I
to answer.
understand. I don't think so unless you let people go.
Okay. And you haven't,
And that's not in
You haven't
there.
let
We haven't
anybody
let anybody go. I think through attrition, if we can look at, one of the things that we want to do, we just haven't had a chance to do that, is set up departments by full-time and part-time employees and get a handle on that so we can control that or make an attempt to.
well, ACA is going to make you do that anyway.
Right.
You're going to be forced to make some.
So if you
decisions.
have 5 positions, or if you have 35 full-time positions and 2 part-time, or if you have 25 part-time, there's a number. You just can't keep hiring part-time people and working them, and you just can't, certainly we control the
What-
full-time.
What departments are doing this?
Well, in departments that we don't have control of, that happens.
I mean, where you been?
In the sheriff's department.
I'm asking
In the
you-
sheriff's department, in the detention, where part-time people are hired, they use them as they need them. And if they have somebody full-time that leaves, they put that person in that job, and then they fill those positions.
Okay, what I'm asking you
Okay.
is, in the departments that we control, which is
Right.
not the sheriff's department or the detention center,
All right.
is there any of that going on in
No.
any of the departments that, are under
No.
the control of the county manager?
No,
Okay.
no. We still want to look at some of the part-time positions, but no, there's not any of that.
Okay.
We can tell you exactly, I can't tell you right now, but I can tell you exactly how many positions by department. We know that number. It's in those other areas where we can't tell you very much, tell you very well as we'd like to. Because the impact is, if you work people too many hours, you got to pay retirement, and you got to pay insurance, and you have other things, so.
And I'm on a task force right now at app, and we're studying this thing, and we're actually going to get penalized by the ACA for part-time employees as
Right.
well. So there's a penalty that's going to be associated
It's
with it.
30 hours a month,
30
is
and
it not?
20. 20,
The ACA is,
Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
Obamacare.
Yeah, because it will, it's,
It forces you to provide insurance for those people.
right.
you have insurance number, you have a retirement number. Both those numbers are near and dear to us.
So we're,
you know,
we're looking at
because-
divesting ourselves of part-time people because of that.
Well, you just really need to look at all those we can. If there's any we have control of, we need to deal with those, and we do. But we need to look at every opportunity we have, because it's eating us up.
what Commissioner Ferguson is asking is, where can you reduce the budget anymore without reducing services?
I really don't know of anywhere that you can do them significantly, because we have so many small departments, just to be honest about it. It's got to be in the bigger areas. It's got to be in the bigger departments.
And one of those departments that's bigger, we don't have any control over.
That's correct.
Well,
What does a 1 cent tax increase cost the, and I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you, what does a 1 cent tax increase on a person who has a property that's worth $100,000 cost?
I'll tell you right now. Of course, a penny generates 200, we've said it generates $100.
I started to say it's $100.
Are you sure?
But 200,
Take 100,000,
Yeah.
divide by 10, and multiply that by 1 cent,
So a 1 cent tax increase is $100.
for a $100,000 value property.
And that's a $100,000 house, and that's about an average house in Alexander County.
$250,000 a penny, countywide. What?
Sorry, it's 10.
$10.
$10.
You said you knew already.
I did. I was waiting on you to come up with the right
Okay.
answer.
$10 then, okay.
Well, I did.
A 1 cent property tax increase is if you have a $100,000 property, your property taxes will go up $10. So a 4 cent tax increase, if you have a $100,000 property, your tax bill would go up $40.
Correct.
that's correct.
And if you,
And
Even-
4 cent would go up.
4 cent would be a $40 tax increase, $40 on your tax bill.
and if you consider that, or if that's something you talk about, that money really needs to be placed in fund balance.
Fund balance.
Unbound.
It doesn't need to be anywhere else, even though we have other needs. We need to put it in fund balance. And we need to get our fund balance headed in the right direction.
I agree, but I'm going to go back to that same sort of point I made from the beginning of,
Right.
yeah, we're going to get past this year and we're going to
Right,
coup.
right.
And then what's going to happen next year? Are we going to have to increase taxes again next year?
Sure.
To facilitate those things that we need? And then the year after that and the year, I mean, at what point?
I think as long as we haven't dealt with the expense of the law enforcement and detention center, until we deal with that, that's going to be the big thing that keeps eating at us. We don't have, unless there's something else, we have something else we do, we don't have, the revenue numbers we've talked. We don't have the revenue to pay for it.
Well, let me-
And so kicking the can down the road is exactly what it is. It's going to fall to that. There's no other way.
Yeah, our revenues have been reduced $3 million by the change in sales taxes. And then you add on top of that, the operational cost of, what was it? 2.6 million, so another $1.5 million. We've lost $3 million, and now we've got to spend another $1.5 million on the operational cost only for the jail, new jail. That doesn't include the debt service. So,
But
there's a lot of costs.
until you deal with that, it goes back to what Commissioner Ferguson said. It's going to continue to be something that we're going to say, okay, where's the fund balance going?
and when the jail's paid off, that's a lot of savings, but that's on down the road.
Certainly.
The budget after this next one will look a little better.
Yeah.
But we all knew that 5 years ago.
Basically, 5 opportunities to raise taxes.
It's not like this is a surprise. It didn't come about yesterday.
Well, I
We
knew
knew
it
we
wasn't a
wasn't
surprise.
getting.
That's why I voted against the budget last year.
As just a little bit of clarification, I'm new to the board, so we've had 5 years of the opportunity. You knew back in 2007, 2008, when you're looking at the numbers of the
Right.
detention center.
Right.
So that's 7 years ago.
Right.
So we've had this many opportunities, and all of a sudden now we get to the alleyway, and the can's stuck in the corner.
Well, last year there was discussion about, there's been discussion a couple of times about raising taxes. Last year there was discussion about it, and there was a decision not to. I mean,
I wasn't on the board.
I know.
And we continue to spend more money even after that.
We do,
We-
but we
we
know
did.
where
We
and
added
we
a
know
meat-
where we're spending it.
$1.5 million went to CVCC.
Well, we think, you know,
Well, actually, more
and
than
the
that,
people that
Judy,
voted for
2.3
that
million went to
think that
CVCC.
Yeah,
education is
2.3, but I'm
worth
talking,
something.
I'm talking about we applied for the grant.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, Rick, there's one other little hidden thing in here, and as a business owner, is this issue of human resources. You're gonna have, even if we went and controlled every cost, and you had your purchasing department, you know, counting the rolls of
right.
number of paper on toilet paper roll.
Sure.
Even if we're able to control costs, you're still gonna have an increase in your human resources because of longevity and because of retirement,
Certainly.
because of all these things.
Certainly.
So we're gonna have an increase regardless with that sort of incremental human resources as it eats into your budget,
We are.
unless you start controlling the number of personnel through this attrition.
Right. The other thing we've done, and we did a few years ago, we've eliminated some programs for new employees, like we don't offer certain things to new employees like we did in the past. We've stopped retiree insurance, and we've stopped some of the other stuff as we go for new hires. We did that several years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but that's one thing that has helped some with controlling those costs you're mentioning.
We
But you're
also
right.
had early retirement offer too.
We've done that.
And it cost us,
It did.
we didn't save a dime.
Well, I think we saved some money, Judy.
Well, but we turned right around and hired people back.
Here's that.
Rick, anything else in
No, sir.
summing it up?
No, sir.
All right, as this is a work session, does any other commissioner have anything they wish to say or ask Mr. French at this time? Or our finance director, I'm sure she wanted to give you some numbers, she can give them to you.
Okay.
I'd like to say the cash flow is a big concern, which Mr. Jessup spoke about that and Mr. French did, but it is, I mean, I see the bills we pay every week, payroll, debt service, insurance. We could get to a point where I have to decide which bills we're going to pay and which ones we're going to set to the side. And that is a very dangerous place to be.
Is our current budget online where people can see it? Is it posted online?
The budget ordinance, yes,
What about the proposed budget? Is it on there?
not yet.
And going back to CVCC, when the CVCC project is done, it's open, it's staffed, are we liable for providing the staff
No.
to CVCC? I knew that, but I just wanted, I'm asking the question.
We're responsible for the utilities and the maintenance.
Right, but not for staff.
No, sir.
Okay.
Just like we are responsible for utilities and maintenance on this building.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And we will be the new buildings.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, that's all I had, thank you.
Anybody else?
This is a Morton's fork.
Well, most of the things that's been said here tonight.
What'd you say?
Morton's fork. Morton's fork is a philosophical argument saying that you're faced with two dissimilar solutions to an unfavorable solution. There's no good solution here.
That would be an understatement.
But at the same time, I think, Rick, appreciate you providing the information for us tonight. And I've already forgotten the attorney's name. But Bob, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. And Mrs. Herman, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's comments, and I hope that these comments and the presentation gave our citizens of this county something to think about, something to talk about. And we will have our public hearing next Monday night here at CVCC
As
at
part
6
of the-
o'clock.
As part of our regular meeting.
As part of our regular meeting, and this will give citizens the opportunity to voice their opinion about the upcoming budget.
Yes.
And the things that we have talked about tonight.
Yes, sir.
This in no way, shape, or means is the final budget. It's still a work in progress.
It is.
And there'll still be plenty of discussion, I can assure you, from each commissioner and from the citizens. And now that we've stimulated each and every one of the people in the county's thought process about the budget, then I'm sure that Mr. French and others will be hearing from the citizens of this county about this budget. And I hope it stirs plenty of talk and the people express their opinion about which way they'd like to see this go.
Mr. Chairman, could you indicate to the public how long they would have to speak at the public?
They will have 3 minutes per person to speak. We will adhere to the rules and regulations that have already been established for the county, and we will have a timer here. Our clerk will be doing the timing, and we will advise each person. Of course, they will have 3 minutes. You do need to sign up. You will need to sign up prior to the meeting, okay? Because that's what we expect, and that's the way we do all of our other public hearings and all other, not public hearings, but all of our other citizen comments. And so we would appreciate each citizen. If you would like to speak, please call the clerk at 632-9332, and you can speak with Jamie and or anyone else there in the office. They'll get you through to Jamie so that you can sign up to speak about this budget. But I appreciate each and every comments made by each commissioner. I appreciate you folks, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
A second.
Motion's made, second. Any discussion? Those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Those opposed likewise. Motion carries.